Good afternoon. Welcome to the November 6th Health and Human Services and Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee meetings. Will we all stand? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Next, adoption of agenda. As far as the agenda goes, I'd like to move 7B to the December meeting, which is the Martha T. Berry report. Mr. Evans apparently could not make it today. Other than that, can we get a motion to approve? A motion by Kraft, support by Drollet. All in favor, please vote. Newfangled thing. Not that new, that's correct. Number 4, approval of minutes dated October 11th, 2017. We have a motion by Carabelli, support by Lucido. Any comments or questions? Please vote. Number 5, thank you very much. Number 5, public participation. Anybody in the public wishing to speak? Going once, going twice, going thrice. Public participation is now officially closed. Thank you very much. Number 6, department recommendation. A, contract with Spitz Pathology Group, PLLC. We have a motion to forward. Finance. We need a motion to forward this to finance. We have a motion by Drollet, support by Romano. Any discussion? Really?
I was just trying to figure that out too. You just have to touch the screen that came back to some light. Just touch the screen with light back.
Are there any speakers or questionnaires or anything else? Dr. Spitz, do you have any comments that you'd like to tell the board about?
Really, I was here to answer any questions that might exist relative to the contract.
Thank you, sir. Seeing no comments and questions, we have a motion and support. All in favor, please vote.
Well, why did it come here if we just voted?
It's another great day in Mount Clemens. Next, number 7, 7A, Veteran Services Third Quarter Report. I need a motion to receive and file. We have a motion by Carabelli, support by Kleinfeld. Laura, how are things going?
Things are going well. I do have something to really report that's really good news, is I found where I can order the by name list of all the names of the veterans in our county. So,
Gesundheit.
bless you, yes. So I ordered that 2 weeks ago, and that comes from Washington, D.C., and I'm only allowed to use it for outreach purposes only. But I will get a by name list for the whole entire county of who receives compensation and pension and who's recently discharged. So if they don't receive a check from the VA, or they weren't recently discharged in the last 12 to 24 months, their name will not be on the list. But it'll be their name and their address.
Thank you. How many, how long a list is this?
50,000? It could be up to 50,000. I mean, that's the GDX. The GDX says we have 50,000.
No kidding. Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did you say you had to pay for it?
I do not.
Okay, good.
I had to order it.
Okay, good.
One
Outstanding.
specific office in Washington, D.C. So I found this out by Washtenaw County. So.
Very good. Other than that, any other comments or questions?
The other thing is that Detroit VA Medical Center
Yes.
moved up to a number 2. They went from the bottom 1. Remember how the rating is 1 through 5?
Right.
5 being a 5-star hospital.
5 being
They-
the best.
Right, and they were a 1. And just this last report, which was a couple weeks ago, they moved up to a 2.
Well, that's good news, actually. How often do they do this?
I believe quarterly.
Is it quarterly? I hope you're taking some responsibility for their progress, that they're getting better all the time.
Hopefully.
Fair enough. Any other comments or questions? Laura, thank you very, very much. We have a motion to receive and file. All in favor, please vote. And with that being said, that portion of the meeting is concluded, and batter up Commissioner Drollet. No, just hit your knuckles against the
All right, I'll use my
table.
knuckles. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We will now commence this meeting of the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee. First thing on the agenda is a Macomb County Renovations Monthly Progress Report. Andy, if you'd like to commence with that report. Oh,
Thank you.
first, I think we need a motion to receive and file before we move forward. So Commissioner Carabelli makes a motion, and Commissioner Lucido seconds it. Thank you. Go ahead and
Thank
give us
you. Appreciate the opportunity to update you this afternoon. Just one item I wanted to update everyone on. At the previous update back in August, Commissioner Carabelli had requested some additional information. That information was forwarded to Ms. Dibb in your office this morning. I believe it's been received by Commissioner Carabelli. So I just wanted to make sure that we captured that as part of the presentation. We have a couple projects that are currently in progress that I'll update you on today. First off is the administration building. The third floor renovation, that work is complete. The punch list for that work is complete. The prosecuting office is currently occupying the space and operating. We have a few items with regards to the fourth and fifth floor with the internal stairwell that was installed. There's some carpeting that had to be ordered, and the delivery date, or excuse me, the carpet is scheduled to arrive November 15th, and the install will follow. So once those items are wrapped up, probably mid to end of November, the work within the prosecuting attorney's office will be complete. The seventh floor with the Planning Economic Development Department, that space was turned over last week. The department moved in and is currently occupying the space. We're about 95% complete with the punch list there. There's a few items that remain. There's some light fixtures that have to be adjusted, and a few other items that Mr. Ray had requested that we address. So we anticipate within the next week or so that all of those items will be wrapped up. Moving on to the circuit court, the sixth floor and the north side of the first floor of the new jury room, that area is completed. It's currently occupied. We've moved on to the fifth floor, where we've completed the demolition activities, and we're into about 80% of the walls being framed, and we have the 80% of rough mechanical, electrical, and plumbing work that's in place. We've also started work on the south side of the first floor. That demo is, those demolition, yes, sir? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you'd, excuse me. The demolition activities for the south side of the first floor are complete. We have the ductwork installation is about 25% complete. We have the wall layout, which is started, and we have rough electrical and plumbing that's currently being installed for the bathrooms. The fifth floor renovation in the south of the area of the first floor, we anticipate that construction will conclude sometime in March of 2018. Those are the only two projects we have currently going. The only other item I wanted to mention was we do have the Clemens storage facility that's going to be bid out towards the end of December. We anticipate that we would have a recommendation for award coming to you at the board meeting in January. So I guess just a heads up on that. And that's all I have.
Great. Are there questions of any commissioner? Yeah. Oh, Chairman Smith, sorry.
Bet there's something on there. Thank you. Thanks, Andy.
Yes.
I have a question for you on the courtrooms. I at least have heard, I mean, I don't have firsthand knowledge of it, but that after the 6th floor was done, there was a bunch of people talking about, in the court building, I think.
Okay.
The courtrooms themselves were kind of disjointed for for trial purposes, I had understood. And I'm just wondering if there's been any talk with you guys about any changes after the 1st floor has been done to the next floors as far as the courtroom configurations.
Yes, sir. And thank you for your question. There were a few items that after the courtrooms were constructed, that we met with court administrator Julie Bovichin and Chief Judge Biernat. They raised some concerns with respect to a few of the finish items that are currently constructed. So we've captured those items. We're currently working on a resolution for all of their concerns. Those items are being reviewed and considered for pricing at this point. It essentially comes down to funding sources and whether or not we were able to facilitate that moving forward.
Okay, but that being said, we don't know what the cost is of any of the
It's currently out for pricing
changes.
right now.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay. All right. Thank you.
no problem.
Okay, Commissioner Carabelli, then Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for you. It's the Clemens Center, you're going out for final bid, you think, by year's end? Is that what you said?
Yep, we anticipate we're going to have a full construction set of documents tomorrow, and Clark Construction will provide a price, an estimate on that, and then we'll make sure that it's within budget before we take it to bid. And then once we get through the bidding process, we'll vet out the contractor and then present a recommendation to you.
Okay. Do you know, because I don't have the whole contract in front of me, the large portfolio when we first started. Do you know that portion was in the original budget?
Yes, it was.
And, okay, so when that comes up, if you could, when you bring those proposals, if you could also show us
The original budget?
what we said we were going to budget and what the contingency cost is. So
Sure.
we have an idea at the time.
Absolutely, not a problem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm pointing at her because she's next. Thank you. What are the changes that you have coming, that are in the court building?
There's a few items that were brought up. One of them was there's a paper ledge that they wanted, that was requested to be added so documents could be presented or staged by the court reporter. There's also there was a dimension constraint due to some of the technology equipment that was installed that the court reporter, I believe it's the court reporter, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, the court reporter's actual space was a little bit too small. So the request was that on the 5th floor that we increase that space to facilitate the technology, and then we're currently looking at a resolution for the 6th floor to revise the existing built-in casework to facilitate that those technology needs. There were a few other items that came up. There was revision to the prosecutor's desk that's being considered. Those are the highlights. I could get you some more information about the specifics, but those are a few things that that come to my mind right now.
And when those things happen and these changes are requested, who pays for that? Who approves those changes?
So we consult with the architect. They provide design, and we take those out and provide pricing. We bring them back. In this instance, that they're revisions to the plan that was previously approved. We're seeking funding sources from outside of the current budget to facilitate these changes. So I guess in another way to say it is that we're looking to perhaps the court administrator or within the circuit court to fund the revisions to these items.
So that's then not coming out of the, Steve, maybe you can help me on that. Where's that money coming from if these are,
I think Andy said that they're trying to identify funding sources. I haven't been involved at this point, so I don't know what's involved in these particular renovations or revisions.
so other budgets are being amended, or, I mean, we're,
So
and that's not coming back to us?
well, I can, when you say they're not coming back to you,
Right, so for example, I've been complaining for almost a year now about the benches at the front of the court. That when I first saw the courtrooms, there were benches at the back that were spectator benches. They were removed. I asked a whole bunch of times how much it was, and somebody said, well, about 30,000. Where are those benches at, and what's gonna happen? Well, I've never gotten an answer, and I've never gotten I'm told they're gonna be repurposed. They haven't popped up anywhere that I've seen as I'm out and around the county.
okay.
And so there's a $30,000 mistake. Who's paying for that mistake? Where is it coming from? And it doesn't come back to us to say what the plan you approved is now different, and there's a $30,000. That's just one little item. And then, so if you're telling me that there are changes, they want to add desks and they want to add shelves and stuff, I understand that once you get it in, you look at it and say, okay, this needs to be adjusted. But then where's the corresponding budget adjustment? And is it now out of the capital plan and now you're looking into the other departments' budgets to see where it's coming from? That's what I need to know.
Okay, well, I can provide you more detail on that, but it's my understanding that for this specific instance, because these are requested changes after the fact, after we've already bought the project, that they would be funded from an alternate source outside of the current campus renovation project.
Okay, so then like for the juvenile court, there's not enough seats for all the jurors. Who's gonna fix that and who's gonna pay for that?
That's an item that I can bring up and we can review, and I can report back to you.
Okay,
and
can
find
you
out
make
if there's-
sure that that's an item in the next report? Because I keep asking, who's paying for these changes? Who's paying for these mistakes? And where's it coming from? And I keep being told, that's an item that we'll look back and let you know. I still don't know. Thank you.
Commissioner Kleinfeld, you took your name off the list?
And then put it back on.
Okay.
And then I think I took it off again and put it back on again.
Are you currently on or off?
I am on right now.
All right. Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Okay, thank you. I believe Commissioner Toko is specifically talking about the fact that the benches weren't ADA compliant, correct?
They were there and they were removed because they weren't ADA.
Correct. So the reason this one's a question is that we're making the assumption that when it was designed to be ADA compliant. And if there was a mistake in the design and it's not ADA compliant, that the county would not be responsible for replacing those benches. We know that some of them are add-ons, some of them are finding things behind the walls and all of that. That specific one appeared to be, if they're not ADA compliant, then there was a mistake made in the designing because,
Okay.
and that's why that's a question. And I don't know about the court one, but I mean, it appears that most things have been coming out of the capital plan money to cover those things. And I think she raises a question that makes us wonder about all of these things. Are we paying for things out of the capital plan that were mistakes that were not of the county's making? And I don't know who's making that determination. Could you enlighten me on who makes that determination? I mean, is it you guys that make that determination? Is there anybody on our side that says, wait a minute, that one was not our fault?
Okay, so to answer, I guess kind of like two-part, we don't make any call on what money gets spent on what. We would advise the county on what the options are, and then the county would make that decision. So I can go back and research this one specific item, give you some more detail. Would that help to solve?
No, yeah, I'm not specifically talking about the things that are the result of the county changing plans or finding things in the county. It appears this was a design mistake. And if it was a design mistake, the county paid to have somebody design it and have it be designed ADA compliant. That would mean it wouldn't be the county's fault, therefore the county shouldn't pay the price.
Right.
So my question was, who determines when an issue is and isn't the county's fault or responsibility? I don't want to use the word just fault, because some things aren't anybody's fault, but they are somebody's financial responsibility. So let me use that word instead. So who makes that determination is my question. And has there ever been a determination that it wasn't the county's responsibility?
Again, I'll have to go back and research this one specific incident because I don't want to speak out of turn. But with respect to who makes the ultimate, who makes the decision, all pricing goes through the Facilities and Operations Department with the director, and then sometimes those items are escalated up to the county level with the deputy county executive for decisions on what items are funded and which items are not.
Okay, you're not answering the question as to who determines whether or not it's not when it's not the county's responsibility.
Point of information.
Go ahead.
Thank you. As the owner's rep, our rep,
Yes.
you're working on our behalf. So the question is come up is that if there's a design issue that we hired an architect for and you're our rep, she's asking you the question, you're going to hold them accountable if this is something the county should be paying for, or hold the architect or the contractor, whoever it is. So you're going to be making a recommendation to the county, which would be Lynn or it would be Mark,
Yes.
on who
That's
should be
correct.
paying for it, or if it's the county's responsibility, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what she
I'm,
was
I'm
kinda-
sorry, I didn't mean to.
Thank you.
Thank you for your clarification, I appreciate it. So when those items do come up, they're reviewed by Clark Construction, who's a construction manager, with myself, and then we bring them forward and recommend whether it's a design error, if it's an owner change, if it's a field condition, and then we recommend that to be considered for approval at that point by the county.
Okay, so if it's a design issue, do you then contact the architect and say, we have an issue, therefore you may need to cover this cost?
There's certain provisions within the contract that allow for a certain percentage of errors and omissions within the contract. But yes, to answer your question, we do contact the architect and make them aware that there's an issue that they need to resolve, and then we work through those issues, and we track, as items are approved, if it's a field condition, if it's an owner requested change, if it's a contingency item, or if it's a design error.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We've got two more speakers. I just wanted to ask myself a question that Commissioner Kleinfeld asked, but didn't get a chance to answer, and that was, has there ever been an instance where a change or an unexpected development or something that was non-compliant was not determined to be, was not paid for by the county? Was there an additional cost in which the county was not responsible for at any point in this process, in which either the architect firm or your firm or somebody else was deemed responsible and had to pay, or has it always ended up being the county has always paid for those changes, errors, or changes in the situation?
Sure. No, with respect to your question, there are after we review what the cost item is and the cause of that cost item, there are certain instances where contractors would be back charged if it was an item that we were found that it was due to their error, that they would be responsible for those items. So it's not every instance that it's the county's cost to bear for cost items. There are instances where contractors are back charged.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Leonetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to get back to what Commissioner Toko was talking about. So like the circuit court on the 6th floor, they have some changes they want to make. And I think you indicated that those changes, the funding for those changes would possibly come out of somebody else's department. Do we know, is it going to be the circuit court or is it going to be field and operations? Are we going to be told where they decided to take the funds from, other than the capital expenditure fund, to apply?
Yes, we can update you on what those funding sources are for the different items. That's
Okay,
we can do
I think it's important to know that, so that way we know where capital expenditure funds are being used and where capital expenditure funds aren't being used. I'm not saying I'm opposed to the idea of
Yep,
doing
I
it that
understand.
way, but we should have some idea here so that we don't commingle things. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I think we have one more speaker, and that's Chair Smith.
Thank you. A lot of my questions have been asked, but is Steve still behind you? Oh, there you are. So let me just ask you a question, and Steve, you might have a little closer, position on this to the county, but so the 6th floor was obviously designed by somebody, right? And if you don't have enough room for technology on the court clerk's table, somebody missed that, right? So do we look back at this thing? Because, I mean, I know we're kind of late, and we can't change what happened before, and believe me, we would have probably changed a lot of things had we, gone from this point and started this project. But a lot of these design things came up where there was a walkthrough one time 4 years ago with someone, and then no other communication, and this isn't necessarily you, but I'm just telling you both for this, no other communication was had with any of the floors or the departments or the elected officials on, all right, we went through, here's this, what do you think? Should we change this? Do we look at this? Do we have somebody who is I guess it's F&O, but do we have someone on our side looking out for this kind of thing? Because it seems like there was a lot of missteps here, and it doesn't sound like it was always our fault. I'm just wondering who in the county, and I understand.
Back to Andy, because I don't know, like you said.
But don't we have, was it in the executive's office, was it F&O? Was there one point person that?
There are consistent and constant meetings with Plante, Moran.
But not
Clark.
with the, so I just want to, this is a little late, but I just want to do this for the future. There was only one meeting. When we started looking at the plan that they were working off for here, it was like a couple plans back. We had actually had a few extra discussions brought on by us, changed some things originally, but then when they came in, they were working off plans that were like a plan or two back. And there was a lot of that going on. So I'm seeing this in the court right now where do we even look back? It's kind of like the, our corporation counsel when we get sued for things and we wonder, does anybody ever have to get questioned or does anything change for this? The court people, someone designed the 6th floor, and if there's not enough room for technology and then there's not enough room for jurors, is anybody responsible for that, or is that just, oh crap, we just screwed up? Are we looking at doing anything different for future projects? Because this was a huge project, and I understand there's going to be, some missteps, but it seemed like almost every department had this kind of thing where we're missing some obvious stuff. So I thought maybe you might know, being the finance guy, on like who our point person was that should have been kind of following up on all of these to make sure that everybody's good with this plan before we get moving forward. It's just irritating. This is more of an irritates the crap out of me. How we
No,
miss.
I understand.
We don't have enough seats for jurors.
Right.
Who designs that? Who do they talk to in there? It's just, and this is
I
all.
think it's a process with the architects and Plante, Moran, exec's office.
And I guess there's an
facilities,
architectural
and I
thing
don't
too,
know
right there, where
that communication, that back communication, if you will, with the departments is
Right.
falling short.
Yeah,
don't know
I'd
that.
agree with that, but I'm just wondering, is that an engineering architectural thing where they should know how many seats the jurors need? Or is it, anyway, it's, man, and we get this a lot, Andy, and I'm not gonna point at you, but we'll look into this and get back with you. I've heard Kathy ask this question. I can't tell you how many times in how many meetings she's asked this question to come back to us about those benches. And everybody in front of us always says, I'll get back to you on it. And I've never heard anybody explain where they went, what happened, whose fault it was. But at this meeting, it's always easy to say, I'll get back to you on it. And the next meeting, we never get the back to you never comes. So I'm going to tell you that we won't forget after this time that this is probably the 5th time that I've heard you talk about this.
And point of it, if I could just make the point, it's not just those benches that I'm concerned about. That's just one thing that I see as one commissioner in the county. There may be other things that I'm concerned that we don't know about, or that, haven't been brought to our attention and are being changed, and we've either paid for it or going to pay for it. And I think we should know what's been changed, what needs to be changed, and what the funding source for payment is. On every single thing since we've, over a certain dollar amount, since we've approved the plan.
All right. Well, mine, is to tell you that, I mean, I've heard at least the one, I've heard all of this a lot of times, and we keep I'll get back to you, it kind of is wearing thin. And I'm not saying it's just been you, okay? So I know that you're not here all the time. We've gone through some changes over this, but I've heard Kathy ask this question in this way several times, and yet have we found anybody to come back with the information that she's requested. So that being said, I'm done venting for now.
Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Thank you. Two questions. The first is, a while back, we got a whole bunch of documents with regard to the overruns, and it was, whether it was a change by administration. Do you know what documents I'm talking
It's a
about?
very detailed spreadsheet.
Yes, yes.
On 11 by 17 and.
Yes. Do you know if those, do you remember offhand, because I don't have them with me, I think I actually do have them in the car, whether or not they indicate which items came out of contingency as opposed
That
to?
I don't know off the top of my head.
They do.
They do?
They do.
Okay. All right. And then just with regard to what Chair Smith said, when we first hired the architects, the one thing I said one thing, don't build this table too tall so you can't see our heads, because the same architects had worked in East Point and they built them too tall and you can't see everybody's heads. And they were originally built too tall. So I think the question is, like, did they sit down with Chair Flynn and go through those? I don't know, but that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other commissioners wishing to speak? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion before us to receive and file. All please vote. Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we have cost share agreement with Macomb Township paving Fairchild and Omo roads from 24 and 25 mile. Mr. Santo is here to answer any questions we might have. We need a motion to forward this to full board. We've got a motion from Commissioner Kleinfeld, supported by Commissioner Lucido. Are there any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How are you, sir?
Good afternoon. Good. And yourself?
Good, thank you. When will this go out for bid?
Actually, this project is actually under construction. We came to you previously with the project to move forward. This is a cost share agreement that unfortunately we had a verbal commitment with the township, and we had a change in secretaries in our engineering department, and it slipped through the cracks, unfortunately, as far as the cost share agreement with the township. So
The actual contracts came before us, but this portion didn't come with
the
it?
cost share agreement with the township did not.
Okay,
at that
so
time.
this is the second part of that project?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other speakers on this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, we've got a motion before us, so all commissioners please vote. Okay, the motion passes, I'm assuming here. Next up, we've got a contract with MDOT regarding traffic signals. We've got Mr. Santo is up at the podium. We need a motion to forward. Motion to forward to full board. Motion made by Commissioner Duge, supported by Commissioner Lucido. And are there any speakers on this motion? Commissioner Carabelli.
With the state for this, and then are they going, because they don't self-perform this, so are they going out for bid on this?
This was actually a contract that was awarded, it was bid through the state, and Dan's Excavating was the low bidder. So this is the contract actually with the state, as far as our cost share agreement with the state. So it was a state bid project.
I have a question, and I apologize. I went online and looked for this information, and I looked in my packet. Am I missing some, because I didn't see Dan's excavation portion. And I could have missed it, and I apologize.
this is what's before you is the state contract between Department of Roads, the county, and the state as far as the breakdown of costs. This is safety funds that we get from Federal Highway. So this is the contract actually with us and the state.
So this contract is for us to agree to hire the state to do this work, or is this a cost share agreement to do this work?
This is a cost share agreement with the county and the state.
Who hired the contractor to do the work? The county or the state?
Well, the bid was done through the state for the work. So we actually oversee, so when there's a low bidder determined, obviously Dan's excavating.
I don't have that information again. Does somebody else see it? Because I can't find it.
Commissioner, you're asking if we have a contract with Dan's Excavating or if the state has a contract, is that correct?
Well, no, and that's where I'm trying to lead to. The contract, it's in front of us is a cost share agreement that the state is picking up a portion, we're picking up a portion, correct?
Yes.
Who did the actual bid process? The state did?
It ran through their state letting program, yes.
Okay. Did we put an RFP together and have the state go out, and then they came back with the results, or they put one together, went out, and they had their vendors, and they went through it?
We put the project together as a county, ran it through the state letting system, and then once we have, this is the cost share agreement with us and the state. Obviously, once we get the pre-construction and everything going, meeting with Dan's Excavating, we'll come back with a agreement or cost share, or not a cost share, but a contract with us and Dan's.
Okay. And I guess that's where I'm leading to, is that, and again, maybe I'm out of touch, and I do that every now and again, but usually we'll see 3-4 bidders, we'll see who the lowest one is, we'll approve a contract, we know this is the dollar amount, or is the process kind of changed on me?
Nothing, I'll get you the information as far as the bidders or.
Because we're
or what you
approving a
mean.
cost share, we don't know what we're approving. I understand the cost share portion, but the actual expenditure, if we went through a bidding process, how come that bidding process didn't come back to the board? And that's usually the approval before, or they're done simultaneously.
I'll check on the history of this contract
And
and see
maybe
if,
this, yeah, just double check for me, because when I see the
Can I get back to you on
contracts, and I, yeah. But at the end of the day, we're spending a lot of money, and I want to know that it was done fairly. I want to know it was across the board, and without having that in front of me, it's kind of hard for me.
understandable, I can get that information for you. And will.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kraft.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Brian, I'm looking at the scope of work here, and every section has, what upgrades are going to be done and things like that. What is a dilemma zone detection installation work? Do you what does that entail?
I'm not a resident expert on the traffic end of it, but dilemma zone means prior to coming to the intersection or for us traveling to the intersection, there's a zone that's considered a dilemma zone. So
I have a lot of those in Chesterfield Township.
There are detection systems prior to the intersection that the intersection recognizes. And I know we're getting into more advanced technologies with connected vehicles and smart vehicles, autonomous vehicles. So there are zones prior to the intersection that are considered dilemma zones that the intersection with its cameras and everything do recognize as far as a vehicle being in that particular location. So.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
In layman's terms, I guess.
Thank you. If it's possible to get a dilemma zone detector for this room. But Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Okay, with respect to Commissioner Carabelli's question, it was a state bid, but who made the determination who got the job?
It's a low bid system, so when the contractors bid on it through
But
the state.
we don't always go through the low bid. The state didn't make the determination. Sometimes you have a low bid, but it's somebody that can't do the job, or.
Well, they have to be pre-qualified. I mean, they have to meet all MDOT specifications and pre-quals for the
So
particular
you
job that's done.
always go with the low bid?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to summarize, what we're voting on today is the cost share agreement, but not the contract with the person who's doing the work, the company doing the work. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so at some point we will be able to bid on vote on the contract.
Yes.
Correct. And the bidding process was through the state, and they are the ones that chose Dan's Excavating through that process, or could we ultimately say, no, we want another person? Who's got the legal responsibility there?
No, the lettings through the state and even concurrently our lettings that we do internally that are not state funded, we go with the low bid system. The only way we can select a different, and it's happened recently, is if we have a local project where it's just our money and the community's money, township or whomever. We do have a provision in our contract or proposal that says we have a Macomb County preference. So if there's businesses within Macomb County, depending on the dollar value of the contract, sometimes they might get a 5% reduction or 1% or 3%. So if somebody bids a $2 million project and the second bidder is a Macomb based entity and they're within, say, 1% of the person that's above them, then they will get the contract over the first
So
one.
the contract that we end up having with Dan's Excavating is a contract between the county and Dan's Excavating, or between the state and Dan's Excavating, or between the county and the state and Dan's Excavating?
This particular document's in front of you is a contract between us and the state.
Okay, but they chose the bidder. I mean, they ultimately, their process is the one that drove, that people went through, bidders went through the state process, and then after they get through the state process, the state hands us and says, here, Dan's Excavating won, have a contract with them.
Yes, they're pre-qualified. They were the low bidder. So everything was good with their bids. They had no errors or omissions in their bid. Their numbers were fine. They're pre-qualified to do the work that was part of the proposal. And yes, they're the ones that were selected as the low bidder through that system.
Okay.
And then depending on if they're over a certain percentage, as far as being over the engineer's estimate, we have an option saying, well, we don't want to move forward because they're too high. They bid it too high. If it's $2 million estimate and they come in at 2.5, we still have the option to say, well, no, it's too high of a margin between the engineer's estimate and that.
Okay, I appreciate you explaining the process. I know we are voting today on the cost share agreement, not the contract, but I think there's a lot of people learning about how that process works here. We have Commissioner Leonetti up next.
Actually, Mr. Santos, thank you, Mr. Chair. He just answered the question. I just wanted to know, are we stuck with this proposal as it stands? Not yet, because we can see what the final contract is. We're just approving an agreement to enter into a cost share agreement, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other speakers? No. All right, with that, we've got the motion to forward in front of us, so will all commissioners please vote?
Excuse me, I didn't hear that? No. I'll shut.
All right, that paved the way for our next agenda item, which is the 28-mile road over northbound Clinton River Road Bridge replacement. Before we move forward, we need a motion to receive and file. We've got a motion from Commissioner Romano, seconded by Commissioner Carabelli. Are there any speakers on this particular agenda item? Seeing none, all commissioners please vote. Okay. The motion passes. We move on now to new business. Is there any new business anybody has before this committee? Chair Smith.
Thank you, Commissioner. So this week, obviously, we're getting to budget time, finalization. We've all been discussing this for a long time. I've had a lot of individual conversations. I've listened to what people have had to say on the board. I just passed you out something about kind of the main items that I would like to discuss with everybody in an open meeting. And we need to, do this for the next couple days if we have to hammer out some agreements, what everybody is really passionate about. I mean, we have to get to this point by the end of this week, so I thought we should start today. Feel free, so under the 2018 proposed budget areas of focus, you don't see an area in there that has a big concern to you, then that just means that I haven't heard about it yet. But I'm certainly, obviously as a board, we're all in this together. So please bring it up. But I'd like to talk at least to these positions or these proposed budget items and where I'm at least feeling the most interest on this. So I'd like to start with talking about positions. And, we have a couple different options on the board. And, as we know, that the executive and finance have recommended a number of new positions. Some of them, see you later, Mr. Santo. Some of them complete general funded, some of them combination general and grant funded. There's a whole different myriad of things. Some of these go right along with proposed changes in classifications also. So it's mixed like this in a lot of these, with new positions that are also mixed in with reclassifications that go on to then create the new position. So it's not as simple as reclassifications and new positions. A lot of them are intertwined, almost excruciatingly intertwined, if you would ask Crystal about this. So I'm going to say that I've heard a couple of different ideas. I've heard just give all the positions as proposed this year, and then let's talk about no more positions after this. I've heard and I've thought about also, maybe we just do the grant-funded positions because that's kind of smart money on things, and not do the other general-funded. However, there's a few general-funded positions that are pretty important also, right? I mean, if you look at it, so it's tough to separate some of these things. And then last but not least, and quite honestly, probably what I've heard around and feel most is that people were saying, we have a classification wage study coming up here. We are always open to budget amendments, in the year, and that maybe we might want to think about 0 new positions as a benchmark for this budget. So I would like to see if there's any discussion to the contrary, because where I'm leaning right now is to bringing out, based on what I've heard, it seems like no new positions seems to be where I'm hearing most, but I want to talk about it in this meeting and find out where everybody's at. We're not voting on anything today. We're just discussing this in open forum so we can kind of get to, so Wednesday's not a surprise, right, to anybody. I think that's the way it should be. We're going to discuss some things today. If it looks like we're coming down to, where I think a lot of people are going, well, whether we do or not, I'm going to also ask to talk to Mark Delden tomorrow morning and discuss, where I think this is going with him in the morning. And obviously I won't have to discuss it with Steve because he's right here. And I'm sure Mark will already know by the time I talk to him. But anyway.
Chair, I've got a question.
Yes.
When we vote on the budget, do we vote on each individual budget or just vote on the whole overall budget? What if some commissioners think very highly of some of the budget but are concerned or don't support other departments?
Well, we don't split the budget up. We come up with a general overall something that we think that we can all live with and vote on. But before that, I mean, we do have an opportunity to vote individually as to what we're going to present as a full, as amendments to where we're going to go, right? So if you, at the end of the day, if you agree with, let's just put, so I think that by Wednesday, everybody wants everything that I think I see everything, flowing in, but you have a different position on positions, for instance. You can float that out there and say, I really think that I like all this, but I'd like to take an individual vote on where we go with this position thing. And then you get a feel for that. Maybe it goes your way, maybe it doesn't. If it does, then that would be part of the budget amendment that we would propose, right? The budget that we would, send back and sign. But we don't vote on these individually for them. I mean, we do, but at the end, we propose a package.
So there, just to make sure I'm clear, there's never a point where we approve a specific department's budget and then move that forward to the full budget vote.
Correct, no.
Okay, so we either just like it or don't like it when it appears, the final budget. I mean, we do have the opportunity to make amendments.
Well, and that's where that would come in, right? I mean, if you feel that, like I'm missing something here that you think that the, I don't know, the clerk's budget, you really, have something to say about it. It should be double, right? You bring that up as, amendment to our final, what we are going to vote on, and that's, it's in there or it's not based on what everybody feels on this. But at the end of the day, you're going to get a whole bunch of things that hopefully you're going to not love some of them as much as others. I mean, we're not all going to agree, 100% on all these. So, which is why I tried to take the ones that I thought I heard the most about. But your opportunity to convince everybody otherwise on any of these items or any other items is in the next few days. And Thursday obviously is the final vote, but Wednesday is usually the day that that most of the negotiation and conversation and voting and all of that is done.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Thank you.
Didn't you?
I think, so if you had some specific things you wanted to do and you put them forth, and so we went through them as amendments and voted on them, and some went up and some went down. And then you get to the end of your document, you don't achieve 100% of what you want. You might achieve nothing of what you want. But the board has spoken on each individual one of those things. Now you're voting on a whole document. And this is where I see this. If every one of us voted no because there was something in that document that we didn't like, the county couldn't function. So where our vote counts is in the amendments attempting to make the changes. And then, because I've seen this a lot where you get there, okay, so then you have a split vote. 7 people vote for the budget and 6 people don't. Well, what if one more person worked the other way? Now we don't have a budget. The county can't operate. That's why I don't like that at the end. There's no way that the budget is going to satisfy every single one of us in every aspect. It's just not possible. So I make my fight in the amendments. And so I'll just throw it out there. I know you weren't keen on, like doubling the size of the budget for education. But since we have employees that go as well, I would just ask you to put $5,000 in there as an amendment. And if it doesn't pass, I'm fine with that.
Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
As far as our budget for conference and...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to vote. If it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass. But I think if commissioners want a vote on something that's an amendment to the budget,
I don't have any issue with that, and I'll talk to that just for a second.
Okay.
Whether that goes or not.
But we're talking about getting a feeling, and are we going to get to a point where we actually vote on amendments, or are we just going to vote on a final budget after we get all our feelings out?
I think we're going to vote on amendments, and that's going to come up tomorrow.
Okay.
For sure, Wednesday. It will come up to vote for amendments to get to the final document, I think.
Okay.
So that's the way I see things going.
Okay, because I'm not even, some of these you're
changes-
going to speak to, I'm not even sure, like the bicentennial with the thought process. I have no idea what everybody else's thought process is.
Well, and I'm going to explain kind of where we're at with all of these different things a little bit, and then everybody can, chime in with this or anything. But my idea is that we're going to kind of come to where I think we're going to be by Wednesday, at least by what I'm hearing, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to vote on any of the issues that if 3 people wanted this. Wednesday will be the day that we're going to vote on amendments to the final.
Okay.
And then that'll give a day for Crystal and the staff to put everything together in the final, how we voted basically on this.
So for Commissioner Gillette, if there's anybody that wants to amend a section of the budget, they need to get that to your office so it can be in the list of amendments that would be available to the commission on Wednesday.
Sure. And we can, discuss it. Today, everybody would know. You would have an opportunity to work with the staff and figure out how it should be worded so that it's brought out properly on Wednesday, I think would be the day to do it. All right? So,
Okay.
let me just go to, since you brought up a topic, I'll bring up the conferences and training, and that whether it goes everybody wants it or they don't want it. I mean, we do have line item transfers with, within the department that I certainly would, if we didn't go, but we needed more money for conferences and training, I certainly would be all for, affording that line item transfer to people if we needed that money to, to go to more conferences. Just so you know, at the final end of it, it would work out the same. You might want it the other way, and everybody might want us to transfer that money right now before the budget. That's fine too, but it could
Okay.
also work the other way.
And before you go on to the next item, I have a question for Steve. Do
Sure.
you mind?
No, I don't
Steve,
mind.
when we're voting on a budget, we're voting on the revenues and we're voting on the expenditures, but if the revenues aren't what we're expecting in an area, have we already voted on the expenditures, so those expenditures are going, and this isn't grants, those expenditures are going to take place, and we have one department we know that is expecting to, or hoping to get money from the state. If we vote on the budget and that money doesn't come in, we've already voted on the expenditures, that money can be spent even if it doesn't come in? Because revenues end up being what they are, even though we
That's
vote
true,
on
I
it.
guess. It would depend on the nature of the department. So if you have a department who's funded entirely by grants, and we appropriate expenditures and we have some anticipated revenues, if those revenues are not coming in, generally those departments have a grant agreement and they can only submit for eligible expenses. If the revenue is not coming in, they're not going to spend the money because we end up in a deficit situation. So we're very good about doing that. In the general fund, however, which is 50-some% funded with property taxes, you have appropriations by department. If those expenditures are necessary, because 60 or 70% of our expenditures are personnel related, you could have a situation where we end up having our expenditures exceed our revenues for the year.
Okay,
Commissioner-
thank you.
Okay. Can I ask, were you speaking, no, just let me for 1 second, if you don't mind, because this is regarding what she just asked. Were you speaking to community mental health at all specifically? Because I know Commissioner Carabelli was looking at that, and he has some information on it
It's
as
the
far
thing
as.
that caused me to raise the question, but it raised a general question that while we vote on a budget that has revenues and expenditures in it, revenues actually end up just being what they are. We don't control those. So I wanted to know if we put it in expenditures, can it be spent even if revenue didn't come in? So
Okay.
yes, thank you.
And I would also add this, that is the administration's responsibility, and more mine specifically as the finance director, is to monitor the revenues as we go through the year, to hopefully get, catch any of those shortages if we need to scale back discretionary spending, if you will. And that's where the quarterly report comes in and all those sorts of things. But you could have the same situation where you end up with, I don't know, for example, back in 2008, all of a sudden you had property taxes take a nosedive, but we had expenses, we had personnel we still had to pay. We still have to function at a certain level, at least in terms of personnel staffing.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Toko.
Are you able to get a list of all of the positions that have been requested, the department, the funding source, and the effect on the budget before Wednesday? Okay. Can you circulate that today or tomorrow?
Thanks. Crystal has all that. She's worked with Steve and Steve Seitler about getting all like I said, it's a tangled mess when it comes down to how much of the upgrades and reclassifications also affect the new position. You take a new position out, it changes a lot of the reclassifications, but Crystal has all of that. Thank you, Steve, and Steve Seitler got her all of that information, so it'll show the general net effect with everything on the budget is just under $500,000 position-wise, but another $125,000 in upgrades of reclassification. So I mean, in general, we're over, I think, in the vicinity of $600,000 or more to the budget.
Okay, will you circulate that? And then in the past, what we've done is when a commissioner has a budget amendment, if it's requesting additional positions or if it's requesting an amendment, we also tag with the funding source or the proposal for where that funding would come or where that funding would go.
Yes.
Are we doing that again
Yes,
this
I
year?
would, yeah, I think that would make life a lot easier for everybody, but, yeah.
Point of information, there's no option. If you come in with a recommendation, you have to have funding.
Funding, so-
Right,
Yeah,
but
and
if we're not going to fill these positions, then do you have a recommendation as to what we would do with that money, or would it just?
Yeah, back into the general fund,
okay.
so we could keep that general fund up to, yeah, the balance where we look. It would not, I mean, I'm going to tell you that I don't have any additional expenditures from anything I've seen from anybody in here where we're looking at taking from this, but putting to this program like we've tried in the past and done in the past. So unless someone comes up with something, I have not heard that yet. I haven't heard anybody come to me or had anybody come to me with any, I would like to see this funded.
Okay, that was my question,
Yes.
if there was, and thoughts on where that money would go if we didn't fund those positions. And then my last issue is are we able to get before Wednesday a list of the clerk's overtime? What's been used so far in overtime?
So,
Through mid-September, we got reports from finance. They were only through September 15th, though.
so we're going to get to the clerks.
Well, I mean, I thought that was kind of like I didn't see clerks on the list, and that's
It's
sort of.
coming tomorrow. We have closed session tomorrow with Scott coming in about some other things going on with the clerk, so that's there. But we can talk about it. Crystal has all of the information up to date, and I don't know if you've spoke with Karen Bethanti yet. We've been trying to get with them.
She's out of town, so someone else can send it by
Okay, but she is working on that. If you
So do we have an idea of how much the overtime has been?
I don't know if I can find that out. I don't know right here today how much.
It'd be a good idea if you did.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
what I think we should do here, being that this is under new business, is given that Chair Smith has passed out, what I hope everyone has is a memo. Why don't we take the items one by one and ask people if they want to speak on that? The 6 items or so here. So the first item on the list is the additional positions, and I don't know, Chair, are you proposing, or you just want input on what we do?
Right now, I'm telling you what I feel I've got from, the response I've received from most people individually and in small groups was those 3 options, and quite honestly, most of them, a majority seem to be leaning towards the option that I would be looking at putting forth, and that would be 0 new positions. That's why, at this point, if anybody feels that it should be any different, I mean, now is a good time to start making your case. It's not the last time you could make your case.
Commissioner Leonetti.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and on of course the subject of positions. So this question is for Chair Smith. The document that you're talking about that you and Crystal have developed recently shows about $625,000 of an increase in the budget. Is that correct? If all the positions were approved, is that right?
If the positions and the reclassifications were approved, that it looks, as far as I remember you talking to, it might be just a little over, so it was just under 500,000 for the positions, and the reclassifications totaled around $125,000. So over 600, probably between 6 and 625 would be the budget effect of those.
Okay, and is that for the 24 positions requested by all the departments, or for the 16 recommended by the executive?
The recommended reclassifications and positions.
Okay. All right, and then I guess I have a question for Steve or any of the other commissioners that can answer this. I'll start first with, hold on, Steve. I'll start first with the commissioners. Being a new commissioner, there was a lot of talk about hold the line. There was talk in the past, and I don't know if it came from finance or from other commissioners, that, we were advised to hold the line on new positions. Do any of the other commissioners have any recollection of that, or any insight that they can provide me with regard to that? And then maybe follow up with Steve if he has a position on the new positions, if he can give us a position on the new positions.
Well, again, I believe each year stands on its own, so, if we have new funding available or something like that, we evaluate new positions each and every year in and of itself. So, for example, I think 2 of the new positions this year are in veterans. That's all funded with a tax levy, so there's no effect on the general fund. So each and every year we evaluate the need for certain positions every single year, all the requests. And we kind of build that into our forecast and the effect on the fund balance, and then we make a determination whether we feel that we're comfortable as an administration with that level of financing.
Let me ask you this. There's 16 recommended by the administration. There's 24 by all the departments, but 16 that the administration feels, well, maybe you should look at this. And I know some of those have grants, and some of them are neutral.
Correct.
In the sense, let's take out the grant ones and the neutral ones. Let's talk about the ones that would have an effect on our general budget. Should we still hold the line, or do you feel, based on all your calculations and everything like this, that this is something that we should consider, some of these departments that are requesting these new positions?
I think we should consider what we've recommended. Now,
Okay.
Again, we've looked at the impact of those 16 positions and their impact on the financing or the fund balance of the general fund, and we're comfortable as an administration with the effect.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Steve. Just to let you know, Mr. Chair, my position on this, and we had discussions, I know, is, anything that has a grant associated with it. And I know we talked that you were going to try to find out if we'd lose that grant if we didn't fulfill that position. So in other words, I think one of the positions had to do with front of the court. I think that there was some grant money involved with one of those positions. So if we didn't fulfill that position, do we lose the grant money that's available? Because I would prioritize giving any positions, or at least we have some matching dollars. If a department says, look, I need this new position, and there's a grant out there that's going to fulfill a good portion of that benefit and salary package, and we have to contribute a little bit from the general fund, I have no problem, in my opinion, approving those budgets. Now, my position could change if the grant money would be available whether we took it or not, and we could always ask for it next year, then I might not vote for it this year.
Commissioner, we're looking into that.
Okay, that's what I
We've
need to
asked
know on
We've
that.
asked some questions, and hopefully we'll have those answers tomorrow or Wednesday at the latest on that. But
Okay.
we'll try to get them tomorrow.
And just so the rest of the body knows, because I believe in full disclosure, that's where I would feel in terms of the positions. Anything grant associated, to where we get some money from somebody to fill that position, I'm very comfortable with fulfilling that position. There's a couple departments that I've looked at their requests, some of what the executive is recommending, I'm on the fence on, but that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You asked a question about what we thought. This year is an anomaly. This year is different than years past. And the biggest caveat to all positions is that we didn't commission it, but we authorized the funds for a commission of an employee compensation and classification study. And I don't know how we could approve reclassification or any position until that information is disseminated and HR says, this is the scenario, we're changing these classifications, we're doing this, we're doing that. I don't know, but do you think we could have a problem if we hired somebody and they say, well, that position shouldn't be getting paid that, and then they end up being in the union, then we have a negotiation issue. Why would we hinder ourselves as a body of, and I'm not saying never fill these positions, but until that report and recommendations come from HR, I'm in a position of hold the line until that information gives us enough information to say, okay, this is fiscally responsible to do this. But until that information is given to us, how could we turn around and authorize anything? Because we can only be hurting ourselves. I can't see us helping ourselves. We have very bright department heads here and employees, and they ask for what they need. I'm sure they can all make a case for everything. But there's a time and a place, and the time is that report didn't come out yet before budget. And if it comes out 2 weeks after it, I'm willing to sit back up and take a look at it. But until that report is disseminated to us with HR's recommendation, I can't support hiring anybody at this time. Thank you.
I've gone dark. I can't hit my button.
Commissioner Lucido.
You would agree to that, Commissioner Carabelli, okay, as far as the grant positions go as well?
Some money comes out of the general fund for it.
Okay. Are there any positions that we've seen that they're fully funded? I don't think so.
Well, I believe that if you funded, it depends how you say it, I mean, but the veterans' positions are coming out of their millage.
Okay.
Right, so that might be even a different animal that we're not considering too, but I mean, it's, you know, it's all out there.
Right.
But that,
Information, and I may be wrong, but our HR policies still go to the Veterans Committee, does it not? Our classifications and all that? I'm asking.
I believe so, yeah.
So it'd be everything, and again, maybe we put the heat on them to hurry up and give us that report.
Right. And it's unfortunate that that report didn't come out earlier, because now really we're kind of going to look like, you know, hard guys by not approving anything. But had it come out earlier and we could have made, you know, more knowledgeable decision, I feel like that would have been good for us and everybody. But
Point of information, when did that report start? Not to cut you, when did that start? When did that, I've heard from people that it happened a year and a half ago.
Year ago.
and when is it expected to be completed?
I don't, it's in the works of being finalized, but I don't know the exact date.
Yeah. Okay.
Get back to committee.
Well, on this issue, I just have my own personal thoughts before seeing other speakers lined up. It's a heck of a lot easier to hire people than it is to let them go. And if we run into a situation where revenues don't come in as expected or something like that, it's really very difficult to get rid of people. I don't mean to put it that way, but it's much easier to hire people. And even if the process is slowed down substantially by waiting till the report is due, I'd rather be more deliberative there, because again, it's just easier to do it, unless there's some crisis that will happen if we don't make the decision to hire the person the next month. If it gets delayed a couple months, what's the worst that can happen other than we have a little bit more deliberative process? So it's just my thoughts. Commissioner Smith, then Kleinfeld, then Leonetti.
I'll wait till the end and wrap up, that's fine.
Okay, Commissioner Kleinfeld.
I agree, we can always add the positions back in. So if you put forth that amendment, I'm supportive of it at this time. And also with respect to the classifications, weren't they going to look at every position in the workload that they're doing in order to make their determination? Okay, so so we already know going into this, because we've discussed it, if somebody comes back way overclassified, they're being paid too much because they have a light workload, we can't just go, okay, and lower their salary. But what we can do is, if those are departments that are requesting more positions, well, wait a minute, you've got some folks in your that are being paid quite well and their workload is very small. So we have every reason to wait for this. We have, and if we're going to get it by January anyway, this budget is for next year. We're only holding them off for a couple of months. So I'll support what amendment you come up with on this. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Leonetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I guess too, that I didn't ask that question, or I may have forgotten, but we can always amend the budget to add a new position after we get this compensation study. Okay. So I guess the only thing I'd go back to is the grant money. I just don't want to lose that. If there's you know how grants are. I mean, there might be a time frame where we have to have the position available and there, otherwise we lose the grant funding. So I would like, and I know it's short notice, I know we only got till Wednesday, but I would definitely like to know that. I think that would be part of our prudent analysis, is to determine if we don't provide the position, is the grant money gone? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kleinfeld, are you still on the list, or did you want to speak again, or did I?
No, but just for clarification, once we voted on the budget, if it's Executive Hackle has to bring the request forward if it's a department of his. So I just want, if he doesn't bring it forward once we've voted on the budget, we cannot go back and go, oh, we've changed our mind, we want to. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other speakers before we go to Chair Smith on the issue of new hires, new positions? Okay. To wrap that up then, Chair Smith.
Thank you. So first, I have found out about a few of the grants. I'll find out about the rest of them. But so far, no issue yet with that, losing the money by a certain date. And second, I do agree, and I'll just tell you, with Commissioner Kleinfeld and Commissioner Carabelli, that it's easier to add, and, you know, I'm sure a number of you, easier to add these things after than to get rid of them. And based on the compensation study and the reclassification study, I think it really is a smart money to do. And also, what I'm planning on doing this year, and Executive Hackle does this, he does a budget message, you know, like he write, you know, I mean, there's something that they try to do, and with the 20% of the budget or the general fund and everything. I'm going to add that this year to our budget amendment, and throw in some of the reasonings behind this so that there's no question as to why we're doing things. I think we wish that we would have, some of those darn charter commissioners would have done that in the charter. It would make things a lot easier. So I figured we might as well do that with this budget, and kind of throw in, you know, if this in fact is the way this works with positions, that we believe that it's, you know, prudent to wait for this study to come out, and that it doesn't preclude anybody from coming back after that to ask for an amendment. So I would put that in there. And that being said, I'll move to one that I think is going to be a quick one, and the easy one is bicentennial celebration. I have an email from Pam, there you go, stating that at this point, well, on November 1st, that the Bicentennial Committee has collected $6,000 and are now at $73,500 of the total of $80,000 in commitments. So $80,000 was their target. That's what they were asking for us for originally. They said they have committed $73,500. My thought on that is that I could see us putting $6,500 in to cover that difference if they do not get to the 8,000 or, you know, the 80,000. There's also an option of just not putting anything in there and saying, hey, if you don't get to it, come to us, because that's such a small and insignificant amount. We could add it then. We could do a bunch, you know, number of different things. I think that it's, you know, pretty minor at this point based on the fact that Pam says they have that kind of money already committed. My thought is to just put $6,500 in on that and pull the rest out. Anybody has any other thoughts on it?
We've got Commissioner Romano on.
Hold on a second.
Wait,
Let me hear what the finance director has to say.
What do you got, Steve?
It's more the proper accounting for it, so I don't know if you're talking about just having an appropriation line item for the 6,000.
Well, I mean,
because what we would need is an appropriation for either the 80,000 or the 77,000 with a corresponding revenue of 77,000.
Okay, well, you know that better than I do.
Right.
So
I just
based
wanted,
on,
just so you're clear on kind of
Okay.
how to write your amendment, so you don't reduce the appropriation to 6,000. Then there's only 6,000 to spend.
Got it. Okay. I'll make sure that Crystal
Yeah.
talks to you about that. But like
Certainly.
I said, Pam sent this email over, so I'm going to guess that she probably wouldn't have put it in writing unless she really had that kind of money. So I
Yeah,
think
my
that-
understanding is she has the written commitments.
Yep.
So it's just a matter of getting the line items
Right.
straightened out in the accounting system more than anything else.
and that's good. I just don't.
Yep.
I'd just like to adjust that appropriately. So
On the list right now, I've got Commissioner Romano and Commissioner Kleinfeld. So we'll go to Commissioner Romano.
Thank you, Chair. Why don't we take that $6,500 and give it to the commissioners for their conferences, and that's money that we don't have to appropriate. They've got $73,500. If they can't complete what they're going to do with $73,500, shame on them, and they still have time to go. So let's take that $6,500 that we were looking for and give it to the, put it in the commissioner's slush fund for their conferences, and then we don't have to worry about it. That's my vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We could also delay it and have a 201-year anniversary if we give them another year to collect the $6,000. Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Okay, Steve, are the revenues in the budget? No. So what we would do is we would keep the 70,000 in there, but we would add 70,000 to the revenues.
Well,
Because if you're
one or two
saying there
things.
would be a corresponding, that's.
One or two things. If you are okay with appropriating $6,000 of general fund money for the bicentennial, you would simply add revenue, or actually it's less than 77,000, so 3,500 or $3,000, right?
6,500 is the left. What's left? It's 73,500 is
Is it
what she's
73.5?
committed.
Okay, excuse me. So if you're okay with $6,500 appropriation, you leave the $80,000 request and add $3,000.
No, because accounting wise, that means whatever, it doesn't matter how much money comes in, they're spending 80,000. It doesn't matter what
Correct.
we appropriate.
Correct.
So that is not what the question is. So they were saying, well, let's just put 65 in there, and we can't just put 65 in there. We have to put 80,000 in expenditures in there. We're anticipating only 65 will come from our budget. So if we're anticipating that, we would have a corresponding revenue in the budget.
That's what I was indicating earlier. Yeah, you'd have a revenue of 73.5, an appropriation of 80. The net effect is $6,500 coming from the general fund.
Yeah.
If you're not okay with that, you would just put in the 73,500 of revenue and 73,500
Yeah,
of expense.
no, I mean, yeah, I'm okay with that, but we do want to put the 80,000 in revenue in. You're saying it's not in there right now.
There was no revenue at all in the recommended budget
So
for the
it's the
bicentennial.
revenue side that has to be changed, not the expenditure.
Right. Depends what you want to do. Again,
Okay, so just by clarification,
Crystal has it.
they've collected the 73.5. That's a commitment of 73.5.
I think they've only collected around 6,000 in actual cash. They have written commitments for the remainder.
Oh, well, can't we make sort of a commitment for the money, but not actually give it to them? No, I'm just kidding. No,
Creative budgeting, okay.
Spirit, we're committing the money. But no, I would hope that this is my, personally, again, not seeing another speaker on there, I would hope that it's a point of pride that the money is voluntarily contributed. I mean, we're not providing a court service, a sheriff's service, important county functions that people expect. It's a celebration, and that's nice. And I think it's a point of pride that people have gone out and raised that money independently. And even if they have to cut that budget 7% from what they expected, if they don't raise that additional 6,000, they're still funded 93% of it. And it's worth that 7% cut that we can brag that this was funded voluntarily and that everybody contributed voluntarily to this. It loses a little of that that spirit of volunteerism when we put a dollar in for such a relatively modest amount of differential. So I would hope that if this ends up in the budget, that would be an amendment that we could vote on if there's not a consensus on that with regard to that. I mean, it's a relatively small amount, but I think it's from my perspective, it's important. I like to go back and tell people that we provide what's absolutely necessary for our constituents. That we provide, we want every dollar to go to the most core essential services. And they're going to come back at me and say, but didn't you blow thousands of dollars on a party? We could explain, it's a bicentennial. Whether you like it or not, most of our constituents won't be going to that. Most of them won't. A few will. Some will. And I'd rather have it makes it easier to say, no, that was all voluntarily raised, and there was no tax dollars that were taken from any other department for that. So that's just my 2 cents. Is there any, Commissioner Lena, are you on the third round on this?
Yeah.
Okay,
So this is
thank
my
you.
first round on this one. Yeah, my position on it, Mr. Chair, is that I concur with what Commissioner Drolet says and Commissioner Romano. If they've come up to 73.5, they've come up really close to the $80,000 mark they have. We've got some issues that we talked about earlier with these positions. We've got to worry about capital projects plan. We just heard the gentleman talk about the courthouse is changing things, so we don't even know where that revenue is going to come from yet, if it's going to come from the court budget or if it's going to come from the capital expenditures. So I just think that it's an important celebration. I don't want to knock it, and I totally think that the fact that volunteerism and contributions have come forward makes it that much more special. And so my position on it is I would make a motion now to receive the 73.5 and appropriate 73.5 for their plan. That would be my motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there another speaker on this round on the bicentennial celebration?
Well, we're under new business.
No, this is on new business. This is not a Okay, the next thing on the agenda is the capital projects plan. Everybody okay with that? Why don't you frame it for us, Mr. Chair?
Great. So most of you, I mean, we've had discussion about that we've hired a company called the Raymond Group. They're one of the largest accounting firms in the area to look at our practices on our budget and how we look at things and how, especially this year, we just picked one because we had a lot of disconcern about the capital projects fund. We had them look at our method of what we're doing with this and telling us if we're looking at this properly or we should be asking, for things in a different way or how we should be doing it. I had a draft that they're revising. They've come back a couple times on things. And quite honestly, what I really want to make sure with them is that it comes back in a form that's is easy and to understand by us, not accountants, as possible. And it's come a couple times. The first time I didn't know what they were talking about. Next couple times, we've addressed what they're talking about, and they've simplified it and brought it down a little more clear. There was a few things I just was texting her to see if she had that final draft that I could get to everybody right now. But what I will say is this: I will email a copy of their draft that I should be getting today to everybody, either tonight or tomorrow morning. I'm also asking them to show up for the meeting on Wednesday, so that any questions about this or their process or their recommendations on what they've come up with, we would have an opportunity to question them for our own understanding of this also. So I can tell you that as of right now, in general, let me just kind of paint a broad picture. There's 13 million or so in funding that's will be rolled over, correct, into the capital projects fund. About 13 million, right? Their recommendation on the way that we look at things, I got to tell you, they kind of shook their head at what we do by giving a lump sum of money to that project fund without any line item. Everything is basically estimated and does not even necessarily have to be done for that money. I can honestly tell you, they said that they've never seen it done this way anywhere. Their recommendation was a couple different recommendations. The first one was to cut everything out of the capital fund and make the executive or the F&O come to the commission with every project on an individual basis and just make sure that all the I's were dotted and T's were crossed and everything, just like a normal contract would come before us, and appropriate the money per item or per project. That being said, we also looked at the fact that there's already $13 million in there. Their second recommendation was put some money in to start, the capital projects fund, so you don't interfere with anything that's currently going on. And, then there's plenty of leeway and plenty of notice that, hey, this is the next project we're looking at. This is the money we're going to need. Come to us and go through it that way. Well, because of this 13 million, it looks like option number 2 is kind of the option that they're leaning toward, because they had talked about trying to get that money to go back into the general fund, which I don't know. I don't know if it's a logistical, a legal, or an accounting impossibility or improbability. So it looks like they were going to say, at the end of the day, they're saying, keep the 13 million in there. That keeps things running just fine for quite some time. But adopt don't fund it anymore. Keep it in the general fund and make the appropriate requests as you see these projects coming. It's a strengthening of the oversight and the transparency on what happens with that money for the board. So I don't have that document. I will get it to you guys as soon as possible. And then you can look at it. We can discuss it more tomorrow. So I'm just telling you in general what I've seen from this and where it's going. And I guess we could probably save this conversation to the greater depth till tomorrow, because I know you'll all have that draft by then and have a chance to look through it and read it. And then we can talk about what they recommend and then what we see, what we might want to change, whether we agree with it or not. That's the next step. So,
Oh, Mr. Chair, if you're done, I've got a couple questions on the voting process again with regard to the budget. And the question is there any opportunity, I mean, when the budget is presented, it's presented by the executive. I don't know if I don't know if we as a board then have the opportunity to pull things out of the budget and vote on them individually. Suppose we wanted to pull the capital fund component of the budget out and vote on it separately from the full budget. It's not in the budget. Now, why are we talking about it? I thought they were voting on the budget coming up. Okay, the funding, pull the funding for the capital fund out of the budget, and could we pull that out as a board, and then have a separate debate on that, and then approve or reject it, and then, so to speak, put it back in with the. Can we change the amount? Yeah. Okay.
I mean, so it's similar to any of these. We can pull it out, vote amongst ourselves, and then put whatever we come up with back into our complete package, right?
So in theory, we could pull out every department and vote on their budget independently, and then put it back in.
In theory, we could do that, right? I mean, we're looking at what we're going to amend, if we're going to amend this budget, and what we're going to amend, and the reasons behind it. So yes, we could theoretically, I would say. I mean, that's why, of course, I tried to limit it down to,
The items that come up, yeah.
I mean, we could do this, especially if it wasn't Monday of the week we're passing the budget. But nonetheless, yes, your theory in general is correct.
And another general question that we're going to go to Commissioner Kleinfeld back on the list there. General question is, are we statutorily required to finish the budget by a specific date? Do you know the answer to that question?
The reason that we're going to look at voting this week is actually we work backwards from the end of the year business dates on the dates that are required, that the executive has X amount of days to veto, and then we have X amount of days to potentially override that veto. So what we do is we kind of work backwards to.
And then gives us a deadline.
And we have enough time for all of that to happen.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Okay. I think what Chair Smith was saying with respect to the funding on the capital plan is exactly what you were saying, because we throw the money in there, and it's once we put it in there, it doesn't matter what the list of the projects were. It ends up being spent on whatever it's needed to be spent on. So the projects we think it's getting spent on doesn't necessarily go that way. So I think that you were talking about the same thing with regard to that. Now, when you transition into, can we pull every department out and vote on them? I think it might be something we could look at next year, but we're actually right now in the week that we're voting on the budget, and it seems to me it would be impossible to get through it in order to vote on Thursday. So, thank you.
Okay, are there other speakers on this particular element of the budget, the capital projects plan? Seeing none, we move to Parks and Recreation.
Okay, Parks and Recreation, it comes from the report that they gave that there's going to be $40,000 spent on, I can't even remember off the top of my head, but it was a master plan for Parks and Rec. And the question was asked, well, there's a significant amount of money in the Parks and Rec fund. Why are we pulling $40,000 out of the general fund to fund this when they have, I don't know exactly the amount. I don't know if Crystal knows or Steve knows, but there's a significant amount in the Parks and Rec fund. I don't know if it's maybe, I guess this is a good question to ask of Steve. I don't know if it's, if there's limitations on what can be spent out of there, or maybe that this could not be spent out of there or what, but I don't understand why we wouldn't take Parks and Rec money out of the Parks and Rec fund that's just been sitting there doing nothing, especially when it's $40,000. So you can look at it either way. It's not much to the general fund, but it's also not much to their
master plan, which does not include just Freedom Hill Park. I mean, it's a countywide Parks and Recreation plan, as I understand it. So if it's not specific to only Freedom Hill, you know, it's more of a philosophical discussion of who should fund it.
And I'll tell
And
you
it's a
that-
planning activity in our estimation,
All right,
but
so that's probably the first time that, it was even kind of explained like that. And that makes a little more sense to me. And quite honestly, I don't have a real opinion on that. I just remember that coming up, and that was a question that we had. Why wouldn't we spend it like that? That makes sense to me. And like I say, it's $40,000. I'm not going to, one way or another. I just was
Right.
curious if it is Freedom Hill money technically that's getting spent on a countywide basis. That makes sense. I just wanted to throw this out there for discussion. I don't know that anyone was really super hot on this. Steve might have, even cooled that fire a little bit with that statement right there. But if anyone wants to discuss it, fine. At this point, I'm looking at not doing anything with that.
So are there any speakers? We have Commissioner Leonetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question. If I recall, isn't this Parks and Rec's going to fall under JP's control now, in a sense? Wasn't there?
that's where the
plan
recommended or the requested appropriation for that master plan is in his contractual services.
Right, the 40,000 would go under
40,000.
him. Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Steve.
Meaning you don't plan on moving that, or you don't?
My plan is
on-
to leave this just the way that they brought it to us, have proposed it, unless there was some, big upswell of, maybe we should take that out of there. But I just remember that being a question that seemed to sit a little.
Okay, I just wasn't sure. Okay, I got it.
Okay, Commissioner Romano.
Thank you, Chair. And I think I brought this up last time. I'll bring it up again. Mr. Schmiegel brought it up about the Freedom Hill thing. There's $40,000 there. The park is used daily, and they can't use the restaurants. They defecate outside the restaurants, or out the restaurants. Yeah, that looks good for the restaurants. For the restrooms, I don't understand. I don't understand why we can't get somebody in there, even on a part-time basis, to at least keep the restrooms open. I just don't understand that. We've got $40,000 in there. It's used a lot. I know it's in my district, but everybody uses it. And I just don't understand why we can't maybe allocate that money to keeping the restrooms open over at Freedom Hill. That would be my thought, and that's what I'd like to see. Thank you, Chair.
I don't have another speaker, so go ahead, Mr.
I just wanted to that point, Commissioner Romano, is that we can allocate money to anything we want, but the executive has to actually implement it, right? So we can say, we want you to hire armed guards sitting outside that bathroom, and we could put all the money in there, but he would have to say yes. So I mean, that's probably more of a negotiation type thing to say, listen, you guys have money in that fund. Couldn't we think about having this? Maybe we do a petition. Maybe you do something like that. Because I understand. I mean, that's right on the path. It does get used a lot. But just so you know the generalities of this, we can put money in for anything we want. That does not mean it gets spent on that.
I would rather have constituents know that it was the executive office that turned it down and not this particular board, because we have feelings for them. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no speakers on this particular round again, I just throw my 2 cents in, and that is, don't we just have one park and one trail? We have to spend $40,000 to have a master plan for a park and a trail? I mean, I may have missed something there. Go ahead, Commissioner Carabelli.
Real quick, point of information on that. Technically, you're correct. But unless the county comes up with a master plan, and it's every so many years they have to do it, the municipalities and cities within the county are not able to apply for DNR trust fund grants, SEMCOG grants. I mean, there's a whole litany of them. So this is one piece to a puzzle that we have to have for us to be eligible to receive DNR trust funds and all the other stuff. So this is a necessity, is that plan.
I appreciate that explanation. We could just reapprove our last plan, call it a new plan, and save $40,000.
That's a heck of a plan.
That would be my plan, to save $40,000, and we can use it to toilet paper for the restrooms at Freedom Hill. But all right, so any other speakers on this particular item of the Parks and Recreation? Okay, seeing none, next item is IT Department, and we'll move to Chair Smith.
So this goes back to the $80,000 a year ago that was removed from their contract services in order for the board to approve a new position in their department. And I know there might have been some miscommunication here, but there was no miscommunication on the side of the board that that $80,000 was kind of a trade-off to then hire that position. Well, this year, that $80,000 made it back into their contract services, and there's still that position being funded in there too. So, I mean, yes, from the general fund, right. So my, you know, I've talked to several people about this, that it was not a one-year trade-off. Unless that position was going away in 1 year, it was not a one-year trade-off. So my thought on this was that $80,000 that we agreed to get rid of was not a one-time, one-year event, because the position was not a one-year event. And I think most everybody kind of remembers that. And although it may have been portrayed or may have been understood differently by the IT director, that was not the understanding that I had, nor any of the other commissioners that were here last year about that. So my thought on that was to remove that $80,000 from, based on talking to everybody, that would be the fair way to go, because we can't horse trade this year and then next year it's a whole different story. So I mean, I'll tell you what I've got from people on this, and if anybody wants to discuss this for or against, Steve, I mean, I understand that maybe some, you know, maybe some miscommunication between us in finance or us in IT or everybody in there on that. And I don't know if you're familiar with this. I don't expect you to remember every single thing that happened last year, but we did bring it up again in the IT budget hearing this year. It was brought up. So I don't know if you have anything to add to this. If not, I don't want to grill you about it, but if you can shed some light on it.
Yeah, I don't really have anything other to add unless you suggested Jake will come back on Wednesday and explain the need for his contractual services to go back up to that previous funding level. I mean, that's just going to be a repeat of his budget hearing, I would think, but that would be my recommendation. And I can't remember what his justification was necessarily from his budget hearing.
I'll just say it was interesting that it was 80, and 80 was brought out last year, and I specifically remember it, like, there was well, take this out because this position will kind of eliminate the need for that. And then it's reappeared in the exact same amount, which maybe that wasn't the right, maybe that wasn't a good idea. Maybe it should have been 74.5 or something. It wouldn't have, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, right. You know. So anyway, that's, and maybe we will. Maybe that's the way to go with this. I'm not really sure. It's just it was something that I know that happens. It's happened probably more than we've realized in different things, when we've given up something and then a year or two it came back. But you know, we haven't had the best, and quite honestly, that's our own fault for not having the proper tracking methods on things that we've done and requests that we've made, and sticking to them year after year to make sure that they don't come back in, whether accidentally or on purpose. So that's, I would just say this is one that I, you know, feel like, and I know talking with some other commissioners, feel like we kind of should turn our head a little bit on that one. Like, so any other comments on that, please feel free. Otherwise,
are there thoughts or comments on this particular item, the IT department?
All right,
Commissioner?
Well, my thought might be then, since there's no real strong opinion either way, is to have Jake will come and invite him anyway. I mean, I can't have him come, but I can invite him to come and speak to that, maybe tomorrow, or I don't know if he's scheduled to
Well,
come
Mr.
in
Chair,
or
if we don't approve that, we can always add it later if it becomes a crisis, correct?
Correct.
Okay, my thought is we don't add it, and then let him come back before us and make his case, and if it makes a good case, we'll add it. That would just be my thought.
Okay.
Any other thoughts?
All right.
Okay. Next item is not on your agenda, but was added during the conversation earlier, which is a conference training for $5,000. That was for the board, staff, and employees, I believe. And is that a correct item on the agenda? You're looking at me like, no, Mike. But
well, it's not on the agenda. That was one that Commissioner Kleinfeld said she was going to bring up as an
amendment, and the funding would be from contract services.
Right, it would be more of a line item.
I see. Okay, so we've got that
she's
covered.
She's going to bring up, and we talked about it.
Okay. All right, are there any other items under new business? Seeing none, we'll move now to public participation. Any members of the public interested in participating? Seeing none. We have a motion to adjourn by Commissioner Duje, seconded by Commissioner Romano. All in favor? Please vote on the, do we have to vote on the motion to adjourn? Yes. Please vote. We are adjourned.